A ship spotted drifting silently across the Atlantic. Sails ragged, provisions untouched. The crew's belongings neatly in place, but not a soul on board. If you enjoy vivid mysteries and deep visuals, like and subscribe. It helps us bring these stories to life. Today we will journey together into a case that still resists explanation. The Mary Celeste set sail from New York in early November 1872 with a small crew, a captain, his wife, and their 2-year-old daughter. The ship wasn't sinking. She wasn't plundered. She wasn't even short on food or water. Within minutes of boarding her, sailors knew they weren't looking at a wreck. They were staring at a mystery that remains unexplained, and what came into view as they drew closer only made that silence more unsettling. The crew of the Dei Gratia saw her first. A lone vessel drifting across calm water, her sails in tatters, lines hanging loose along her hull. From a distance, she gave the impression of neglect, but not of catastrophe. No cries, no clatter of work, no commands carried by the wind. The silence already felt unusual, and once alongside, they recognized the scene defied familiar patterns. Climbing aboard, they expected wreckage. There was some sails worn, rigging strained, and about 3.5 feet of water sloshing in the hold. One lifeboat was gone. Yet this was no sinking hulk. The Mary Celeste remained upright, her hull intact, her course aimless but steady. The ship floated with the strange poise of a vessel that had been deserted, not destroyed. That begged the immediate question: why would her people leave? She was far from land, and her deck carried no distress flag. An ocean-going ship still fit to sail is the last true barrier between survival and the open horizon. Stepping away from that safety left a contradiction hard to reconcile. The main hatch was found secure, but the fore and lazarette hatches lay open with their covers nearby, as though someone had hurried to check them. More telling still, a makeshift sounding rod was found on deck, and one of the pumps had been taken apart. Whoever had been on board had been measuring water levels and attempting to manage it. But the water, while concerning, was far from fatal. The decision to abandon under those conditions now seemed less a requirement and more a mystery. The ship's binnacle, once the neat housing for her compass, was shifted from its usual place, and its protective glass was broken. Such a detail spoke of disruption near the captain's station. Something disturbed, yet not destroyed. These changes suggested haste, fragments of action rather than chaos. Below deck, the pattern repeated. Food stores for 6 months sat in place, barrels sealed, pantries filled, water casks untouched. Clothing and bedding remained laid out in cabins. Trunks held garments folded neatly. Personal items like pipes and dishes were in order. It was as if the crew had stepped away, expecting to return at any moment, leaving their small world tidy behind them. Yet nothing spoke of violence. The timbers bore no scorch of fire. The decks showed no drop of blood or clash of weapons. No looting, no theft. Pirates had not come, nor had explosion or storm torn the vessel apart. Instead, the absence of destruction underscored a new problem. Fear had driven people from safety, but there was no evidence of what they feared. The cargo itself created another puzzle. Sealed casks of alcohol, volatile but intact, still lined the hold. No sign of leakage or ignition marked the barrels, yet they were always a potential hazard to men who sailed with them. If vapors had built unseen, the possibility of sudden disaster might have inspired panic, but the physical evidence refused to confirm it. Most conspicuous of all was the severed rope where the lifeboat should have hung. It had been cut, not carefully untied, suggesting urgency. And with the small boat missing, the traces left behind pointed clearly toward evacuation. But with the ship still seaworthy, their choice to leave raised a sharper riddle than the state of the ship itself. That's where the puzzle now turned. The lifeboat was gone, but so too were critical navigational tools and documents, items without which survival was nearly impossible. If there was indeed an evacuation, the traces it left behind raise even more difficult questions. Essential gear was taken, the captain's navigational instruments and many of his papers, but clothing and most personal effects remained in neatly ordered cabins. Such a pattern suggests not blind panic, but a choice shaped by urgency. It was as though they armed themselves with charts instead of food, compasses instead of coats. Direction became the priority, not provisions. The fear, whatever its source, seemed tied less to survival on the open sea than to the danger of staying on board. The ship's log offers the next clue. The last entry, dated November 25th, noted the Mary Celeste's position near the Azores. 9 days later, the ship was found adrift. When the rescuers searched, they found that the logbook was still in the mate's cabin, ending without alarm or warning. Captain Briggs's official correspondence, however, was missing, along with the sextant and other key tools. The contrast is marked. A neat, ordinary log left open on the desk, while the very equipment needed to chart a course had been removed. The lifeboat, then, seems to have been readied not as a desperate leap into chaos, but as a calculated extension of the voyage. Even the detail that the yawl's rope had been cut, not untied, points to haste, deliberate but fast. Weight presses heavier when you consider who was on board. This was not only a crew of professional sailors, but also Briggs's wife, Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter. What kind of threat would it take for an experienced captain and father to carry his family into a small craft, far from shore, in uncertain seas? Abandoning a seaworthy vessel in open water is no casual act. To place wife and child in a lifeboat suggests that he believed something invisible aboard posed greater peril than the Atlantic itself. The neat cabins make clear they didn't scatter in panic. The decision reflects not frenzy, but what might be called orderly fear. The search of the cabins revealed another striking detail. Bunks were made. Chests remained shut. Crew belongings lay in place, undisturbed. There were no cuts or breaks in the wood, no signs of a fight. Mutiny would usually show itself in smashed locks or plundered stores. Instead, the only absences were official papers and instruments. Items that gave authority and direction. Whatever happened, everyone seemed to have left together, aligned in their decision, prepared for at least some further passage. One likely source of their alarm lay below deck. In the hold sat 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol. Fumes leaking from these barrels could build into a cloud heavy with risk. If the smell reached the crew, the fear of sudden fire might have driven them clear of the ship. Alcohol flames are difficult to see, capable of burning without smoke, and any spark could have meant disaster. The crew may have believed the only safety was distance, even if that meant climbing into the lifeboat. But when inspectors searched afterward, they found no scorch marks or evidence of fire. Later tests proved that fumes could ignite with little or no surface damage. Yet the fact stands. No flames touched the Mary Celeste. The ship remained intact, holding the supplies, the belongings, the structure of normal life. The threat may have been real only in the minds of those who fled. So the contradiction endures. The ship was abandoned carefully, with navigation in mind, yet also hurriedly, with fear pressing at their backs. The lifeboat was cut free as though every moment mattered. The cabins upstairs showed calm preparation. What drove that balance between panic and planning has never been pinned down, which leaves you and us with a vessel that floats steady and whole, yet stripped of its people. Not a ruin, not a wreck, but something else entirely. An enigma that remained adrift long after its crew was gone. And in that paradox, you begin to see why the Mary Celeste has never been forgotten. The unanswered trail left behind points to a conclusion as incomplete as the ship itself. The Mary Celeste was never a wreck in the usual sense. She floated steady, stocked and sound, yet emptied of the very people who gave her direction. What remained was a vessel balanced between order and alarm, like a locked room missing its final key. Investigators later noted the disassembled pump, the sounding rod left on deck, and the cargo of 1,701 barrels of alcohol. Many now see a fear of explosion or flooding as the likeliest cause, shaped in part by inaccurate readings of the ship's condition. One plausible reconstruction even shows that currents could have carried the vessel from her last logged position to her discovery point, suggesting she may have been deliberately set adrift after evacuation. A Gibraltar salvage court examined her for evidence of foul play, but found no convincing proof of murder. Stains once thought to be blood later tested negative. The likeliest explanations now remain natural ones: fumes, faulty equipment, or navigation errors. But no verdict has ever satisfied all who study her fate. At the heart of this mystery is a quiet truth. Fear, not force, seems to have driven her crew into the lifeboat, and yet no single answer has won consensus. Subscribe and turn on notifications to keep exploring mysteries like this with us. And tell us in the comments which theory you find most convincing.